Thank you, Kevin. My name is Elizabeth. I am an alcoholic. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. I have been sober since January 3rd, 1988. I'm very grateful for that. I was saying before the meeting, it's been one of those days I could have used an extra hour a couple of times, so I haven't had time to think about tonight. But so I looked at some AA literature right before Kevin called on me, and I want to read something from the 12 and 12 from the forward, something I did not see for many, 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 many years because I didn't read the forward unless someone told me I had to. It says AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which, if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. For a really long time, I got sober young. I was 21 years old. And I got sober in a place where we were all having therapy. We were having a therapy group. They'd read the 12 steps, and then after that, you really didn't hear anything about AA. And I loved it. They made me feel welcome. They made me feel loved. I'd take the meeting hostage for 5 minutes and talk about my problems and cry. And I was the cute little 21-year-old that, they were all older than me. God, I don't know how they put up with me, but I really try to pay it forward today and make sure that I am patient and loving to someone who's doing that in my life today. And, I kind of, even though I did read and I do know how to read and I do know how to comprehend things, somehow I still bought into the idea that this was about not drinking, and I stayed dry through a lot. I am a survivor. I am a fighter. Uh, I grew up the oldest in my family, the oldest, and not only in my extended family as well. So there are a lot of expectations put on me too, and I was smart like my dad. That's what they would tell me. And my dad was really smart. So, and my parents were those types, they would always like be at their dinner parties, and get us babysitters. Sometimes not get us babysitters, I don't think. Um, but I learned how to become self-reliant, and I knew I could count on my intelligence to get me through. I was also kind of on that place where women were encouraged to get into business and have a family, of course, all of it. And I did that at exactly the same time. I started a business and had a child within a month of each other. So that was really good planning, let me tell you, on my part. But, I read when I was a kid, I was really shy. I definitely wouldn't be talking to you guys like this unless I was halfway drunk. I looked, at the ground a lot. I got teased a lot in middle school, especially. And, I just had a core of low self-esteem, like I think so many of us have, just a core of low self-esteem and nobody around to help me through that because I wasn't telling anyone, for one thing. I was not admitting to it. Even when I was getting bullied in middle school, I didn't tell my mom. I was afraid she'd agree with them and say, oh yeah, I get it. Yeah, no wonder. My mother was very pretty and popular. My father was handsome and smart, and he was like the catch, right? He had his dad's name, his dad's last name, and or his dad, he was a third. But I just always remember, after I got sober, and I would think, how come I only drank for 6 years? But I can remember all the way back down to kindergarten and younger, just feeling like I just didn't quite fit. Something was off. How come everyone else seems to know what to do? How come everyone else seems to know how to make friends? How come they know where they're going? And I was recently reminded of a photo of me where I'm 5 years old. I'm in ballet class and we're having a recital and we're all wearing these lamb costumes, right? These little lamb ears on our head. And in the picture, I'm the only one still seated on the stage. Everyone else has already gotten up to walk to the next cue. And that's kind of how I always was. I was always, when everyone was going left, I was going right. I was very frustrating to my parents. I did end up having a child that was exactly like me. So just so you know, I got the karma for sure on that one. But I remember being alone a lot. I would stay up really late, I think to get time alone, and then I would sleep really late the next day. And during the summer, my whole family would leave and go to go, to the country club and play golf and all that, and leave me at home because they didn't want to deal with trying to wake me up. And I remember feeling so upset. I didn't like being left. I didn't like being alone, but it was where I was safest, and I got into books. Like I said, I got into any drawing. I love to draw. I wrote a book in ninth grade, and I didn't realize, of course, until much, much later that this was my way of coping with life. There's a man, he recently passed away in Louisville, Kentucky, named Burns Brady. He was a doctor in addiction medicine. And not speaking from a medical point of view or anything like that, this is just what he said and what I understand. He said that that the alcoholic, what we have in common with other addicts is that our brain chemistry, we have like a problem with one of the dopamine receptors. Now, I don't know exactly what that means, but I do know that dopamine is one of the reward chemicals that makes you feel good, happy, okay, I'm okay in my own skin. And if I was born with a problem with that, that makes total sense to me. That explains to me what was going on between my earliest memories and age 15 when I first got to alcohol. So I don't know if that helps anybody else. It did help me. It kind of explained a lot. And I've heard funny speakers say, they felt like they were probably ready for a drink at age 5, so they waited. I love that. I definitely can understand. And that is what happened to me at age 15. My sister, who was more popular than me, who knew how to make friends, she and her friends were getting high and drinking some beer. And I wanted to come along. And after that, like after feeling that way, that's all I wanted to do. The very first time I got drunk on my own, I did not know how to make a drink. So I filled it almost to the top with rum and then a little bit of Coke. There wasn't a lot left over. I guess that's how you make a drink. I don't know. But I heard my stepbrother and his friend were going to drink, so I wanted to be included. And I remember when I walked in the room, they looked across the room at me like, what in the world are you doing? Because I guess they could smell it from across the room because it was really strong. And that night I got so drunk that I was in a blackout. I don't remember any of that night. And the next day I woke up and I had scratches and bruises, and people had to tell me what I did. Of course, that didn't seem like a problem. I continued to drink. I couldn't wait. I started going to Rocky Horror Picture Show. We had an old theater that showed it with, the people doing the stage performance and all that stuff. I'm 15 years old and I'm dressing up in fishnets and tiny little, whatever you want to call what we had on. It was very skimpy. I don't know if I would want to allow a daughter to go out looking like that, but that's okay. It was the 80s and lots of makeup, teased up hair. We had a blast. It was the first place where I really felt like I could be myself and have fun. And that's kind of the spirit of the movie for sure, as well as other things. But I just remember associating alcohol and marijuana is a big part of my story too, with feeling free and okay. And I can look you in the eye. I can talk to you. And then like it so eloquently says in Bill's story, at some point it turned like a boomerang and all but cut me to ribbons. I am really good at ignoring the truth, you guys. It can be sitting right there. Dr. Harry Tiebout, the psychiatrist, whatever he is, he wrote papers and papers about alcoholics, right? And he says defiance for an alcoholic is the ability for us to look straight at reality and snap our fingers and move on unperturbed. We don't even acknowledge it. Like it's a good way to deal with anxiety for sure. But it explained a lot for me too when I saw that, because I can sit here and tell you I'm a high bottom drunk, and yet I got kicked out of my first school 3 months after I started drinking. It only took 3 months. Yep. So that's what happened. I got kicked out of my first school. I had been stealing beer from a grocery store across the street from school and hiding it in my book bag. And this girl was mad at me. I was a junior in high school. And the next thing I know, I'm in the dean's office and they're telling me they have my book bag in there because we didn't use our lockers. We were way too cool for that. We just stacked them up on the side of the wall. And I was out. And so my mom shipped me up to boarding school near Chicago, north of Chicago, Lake Forest. It was very cold and lonely. A lot of the kids lived in the area and went home on the weekends, except for those of us who lived further away. I immediately found the other drinkers and druggies at the school. We would go out in the woods and smoke marijuana. It was easier to get than alcohol. And I couldn't wait to get home and see my friends. Every chance I got to fly home. And I got kicked out of that school as well. I just attended my youngest child's graduation yesterday, and I was so happy to be part of that. I did not get to walk my own graduation. I got to get my diploma in the mail and take my exams at a local study center because they threw me out a month before I graduated and they allowed me to graduate. And then I went to college. And it was just all I remember. So the first 3.5 years of being at university, I was just chasing the party. That's all I did. I always could pretty much get through school if I wanted to. If I was interested enough in a class, I could do really well. If I wasn't interested, I couldn't force myself to do anything. So I would have these easy electives and I would get a C, and then the hard classes in my degree where I would get an A because I would work hard at it. But by the time I was 19 years old, I was just filled with shame. I had a long-suffering boyfriend I met as a freshman 1 month after I was there, and all I did was cheat on him all the time, like constantly. Like I can't even, I could probably do the math and tell you what percentage of the time I was busy finding somebody else. I can't imagine what I must have thought. I just remember he would hold my hair out of my face while I puked and cried about other men to him. And he put up with this for a long time. And do you know I got sober? And a month after I got sober was Valentine's Day, and I broke up with him on Valentine's Day. Yeah, that's what a nice person I was. And just for the record, he met someone 8 months later, and they're still together. They have a beautiful life. He totally deserved it. Very happy for him. They have 2 kids and all that. But I got to a place where, I would get drunk. Often I would be at like a fraternity house. I would end up upstairs to use somebody for their drugs. And suddenly it would be me and someone else alone in the room. And I never could figure out quite how that happened because it was a group of people just a few minutes ago. So now what's going on? And one night, I realized this was happening and I left. I'm like, I'm leaving. Like he went downstairs to get us more to drink and I'm like, I'm out of here. So I start running and I'm going back to the dorm and I realized that my car is parked somewhere where it's going to get towed if I don't move it. So I decided I'm going to go move my car. And either I walk around that building or I climb this fence right here. So I decided I would climb the fence. And I get up to the top of the fence and it's one of those metal ones with the little loops at the top. And I am caught by my necklace and my jeans and I can't move. And I'm sitting there on either side and I'm sitting there and all of a sudden I get one of those moments that you get when you're drinking. Like, what the F am I doing? What am I doing? Oh my God. I mean, it didn't even occur to me that I shouldn't drive a car. Okay, that didn't even come into my mind. It was just, why was I so stupid to climb this fence and think that I could climb it? I mean, there's so many things wrong with the whole situation, but I had, so many of those little moments, but one of the ways that marijuana played a part for me was it was socially acceptable to start smoking weed early in the day. And that the wake and bake, we called it. See, because I knew that with alcohol, you weren't really supposed to drink until the evening unless it was spring break or there was a football game, right? There were always excuses and loopholes, but generally, if you started drinking early in the day, that was bad. And I remember one time I woke up after a particularly bad night. I got to the place where someone passed my name to someone else because I was an easy, quote, date. Let's just put it that way. And I just sat there and realized what had happened. This person pretended to know me, but didn't. I saw him years later, by the way, and hoped that he guided his college-age children to act better. But I just felt nothing but, I felt so dirty. Like I woke up and I just felt so much shame. I felt covered in dirt and shame. And I was sitting on the floor of my dorm room And I don't remember who I called. I got on the phone. I don't remember who I called, but I remember thinking very clearly, I am going to go get high right now. And that's what I did. And I had like several of those times that I can remember, but that one was very clear. And see, because it wasn't alcohol that got me to this program, it was my shame over my behavior when I drank. And that's what finally happened in the winter of 1987. My father had been in AA in a year by this time, and he hold on, guys. I said, Dad, I didn't tell him the whole story. I did not tell him everything that was going on for sure. But I said, I don't know whether to break up with this guy or marry him. And my dad said, you're a child of an alcoholic. I saw Robert raise his eyebrows. Yeah, that's a little weird question, isn't it? I mean, but my dad said, you're a child of an alcoholic. You're going to have problems with relationships. Why don't you try going to Al-Anon, our sister program? And I said, okay. And then New Year's Eve, I saw a couple of my friends from high school and they were in AA and they said, we're going to be at the same church at the AA meeting. So let's go out after. So Friday, January 1st, 1988, I was sitting in an Al-Anon meeting and I realized that I had thought about getting high all day long, but I knew I shouldn't be for the Al-Anon meeting. And my dad had mentioned the words mental obsession. I had never worried about what I did before. I could do anything I wanted to. I made sure I always had it. I had one of those Chanel No. 5 cases. I had it emptied out from the bottle and I had, weed and papers and a pipe in there. Always had it with me. I always got whatever I wanted. I had a fake ID from like age 16 on. I never stopped to think about what I was doing until that day. And I decided that I would start going to AA. Oh, and the Al-Anon sounded like they were talking about me too. That was, yeah, really sounded. I mean, I was just waking up, at that point. So I decided I would start going to AA. My sobriety day is January 3rd, 1988. And I went to a really big meeting that night. And I remember, and I wasn't sure if I was an alcoholic, you all still at this point. I was not sure. It seemed like maybe there's a possibility. And I was so confused. But I remember people talking about how they felt. And it hooked me in. I'd never heard people talk about admitting to fear, admitting to insecurity, admitting you feel less than. I'd never heard anyone say that. And I was immediately hooked and I started going every single day. I started sticking with the people my age that were in AA. We were a little group of people. And when I went back to school, I had to go back and finish one more semester. And there was like a tiny little group of us that were college aged and we just stuck together because I needed to. Thank God. I mean, I had real friends back in Louisville. I had friends at home, but at school, the people that I was spending my time with were people that just to get high with, to cut class. I'd drive to school, couldn't find a parking space, so I wouldn't even go to school. And then I'd go get this girl named Patty and we'd go find some weed, usually. That's usually what we would hit in the middle of the day. And I needed other people to hang out with at school. And so I just really stuck with the people in AA. And it became a really big part of my life. And I loved it. I love learning. I always have. And there's so much to learn here. I went on through my 20s. I got into therapy. I found out a lot of baggage I was carrying around that I definitely needed a professional to help guide me into. My mom had a really hard life and she did not know how to love us, but I always gave her excuses in my head, like, oh, I'm too smart. I don't need a mom like other people. My mom's too cool to go to PTA meetings, parent-teacher meetings. And I didn't realize all of that was a cover. When I first got here, y'all were saying, oh, I used to get away from my feelings. I'm like, I just like to party a lot. I don't know what y'all are talking about feelings. Like it took me a long time to look back and realize I had been running away from the little middle school girl that got bullied, who looked like she was 12 until 21, which paid off later, by the way. People tell me I look younger than my age, which is great now, but at the time it wasn't. And, but I found out how, that I had to come face to face with that little girl inside that was carrying all that pain. And I believe that's really important. And that's, the number one thing I'm grateful for is that I got sober. And the number two thing is that I faced that. that I did that work, the trauma work. Um, and I believe personally that due to my brain chemistry, I could have had the most loving parents on earth, but you look at me funny and I think you don't like me and there's something wrong with me. So I had both. I had the nature and the nurture, or lack of. And they didn't know. I'm not trying to blame them, but it's important that I look at how it affected me and what I was carrying around. I, in essence, would give my inner child away to any man who would take care of her, which made me not a fun girlfriend before I got that work done. I was very smothering and needy, very, very. I could tell you stories, and people who know me now, they're like, I can't imagine you acting that way towards anyone. Uh, but I know it's a reason that a lot of people end up drinking. So I like to mention it because I really am grateful that I got that work done. And it was hard. It was hard. We did role plays. I did non-dominant handwriting, lots of tears. Thank God somebody told me no tears are wasted. They're all healing. It's all about healing. And because I hated to cry, it was not safe to cry when I was growing up. And there was a lot of crying once that work started. And I'm so glad still, like, there's no way I could be whole and give the kind of mom that I've been able to give to my kids had I not done that work. Because I wouldn't even know what it meant to be loving and support other people's self-esteem. I wouldn't have any idea. Anyway, I got that stuff done within like the first 5 years of recovery. And then I ran my life. Oh yeah, I managed and ran my life, guys. And I did a good job. I really did. I got married. I had a beautiful house. I had all the stuff, right? The cash and prizes I've heard people call it. I had a business. I got on TV. I was in the paper. I had Metallica as a client at one point, and everything was great. You know, you hear the butt coming. The butt's coming. It's coming. You know how in the book it says, if we fail to perfect and enlarge our spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, we cannot survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. Those trials and low spots came partly because I can't, you know, when you're young and you don't have a lot to manage, it's a lot easier to manage life until it gets real, real busy. You got 2 kids, a marriage, a house, a business. And I found out that what my husband and I both had was meeting-based sobriety. And then we had no time to go to meetings. So guess what happened? We both got really, really selfish again. Nothing but fighting, who's getting what. And so around between 11 and 14 years sober, things started to really go downhill. I started to lose my marriage, my house, my business. And then I met this guy. And this guy was, oh boy, he made me feel so good. Oh my God, you're Elizabeth. You do all the websites. I've heard of you. Let me come to work with you and we'll do all this stuff. And he helped me grow my business briefly. And then the next thing I know, I'm in a relationship with him. And it was all totally self-centered. I didn't know it at the time. I just felt really beat up by life and I wanted something to make me feel better. When I was 14 years sober, I tried to break up with him 15 times and he found a way to always lure me back and tell me, and I'm not saying I wasn't sick. I was very sick, but he was really good at getting me back and saying everything I wanted to hear and then turn around and act the same way. So my self-esteem just went downhill because I know how you're supposed to treat people by now. I've done all that work, right? And 14 years sober, I land in the parking lot of one of our AA clubs here, not AA club, you know what I mean, L&O club, whatever. And there's no such thing as an AA club, just in case, traditions people out there. Anyway, I'm sitting in the parking lot crying because I can tell you every reason why I'm with this guy. Every single reason why. I could write a book about it. I read all those books. I read all those self-help books, all of them. Codependency work, I've done all that stuff, right? And I had a mom that was narcissistic, et cetera, et cetera. But I can't keep going. I can't stop going back to him. And I don't know why. And I just remember I'm sitting there, it's raining outside, it's dark. I look at my arm and I feel like I'm trying to use an arm I don't have. And I'm crying and I'm like, oh my God. And I think about Bill Wilson and the word powerless. This is what this is. I'm powerless. See, I didn't get there with alcohol. Not like that. I didn't wake up to all that with alcohol. I was ashamed of what I had been doing, and it led me to come seek help. But right around that time, this girl asked me to sponsor her, and I didn't have a sponsor. And I knew you needed to have a sponsor to be a sponsor. And I thought, this is a God thing. God's reaching, he's throwing me a lifeline here. So I'm going to say yes to her, and then I'm going to go get a sponsor. And I was going to go to this one meeting, but I was running late that night. So I went to a different meeting and I walked in, and standing at the podium was a woman I had gotten sober with, who did all those therapy meetings with me, where they just made, "We love you, honey. Go take a bubble bath. Come back tomorrow." And she was standing at the podium and she said, I still can't believe it was her that carried the message to me that night. She was someone I looked up to, I really bonded with her early in sobriety. She said, "I was 15 years sober and didn't have a God of my understanding." And I'll never forget it. It's like everybody else in the room went blurry except for her. I'm sitting right there. I'm watching her, listening to her. And that night, I asked her sponsor to be my sponsor. And I have had Camille ever since. She was here recently. She's 52 now, 52 years sober. And I asked her to be my sponsor. And she said, "If I'm going to be your sponsor, here's what you're going to do." She said, we're going to read the big book. And I remember thinking, what has the big book got? Just a bunch of old guys drinking, how's that going to help? I've read John Bradshaw. I've read M. Scott Peck. I've read, all these other books. And you're talking, she said, "We're going to go through it and we're going to study it like a textbook. You're going to write stuff down. I'm going to give you stuff to do every week. You're going to meet with me and you're going to get a home group. You're going to get a service position. You're going to go to, at least 3 meetings a week. And if you don't do these things, or if you miss 3 meetings without a good reason, 3 meetings with me without a good reason, then I'm not going to be your sponsor anymore." And I did everything she said. I was ready. I had picked sponsors before that never told me what to do, you guys. I picked the ones I could tell too, I could spot them. Oh, that person won't make me do anything, But she took me through the book very slowly. And I'm so grateful. And we talked about the relationship and why couldn't you leave and how I was trying to use that situation to fix me. I was using something on the outside to fix the insides, just like I did alcohol. It was the same exact thing. And she said, because alcohol was 14 years ago. We're going to talk about, and she emphasized, you have to keep growing. Because this thing changes form. I have something and I still have it. Just because I stopped drinking 36 years ago doesn't mean that I don't still have this disease. It's a disease of the mind. It centers in the mind. I still have it. And that's why it needs regular treatment. Because otherwise my brain's going to go back to, oh, maybe that'll work. And she said people get sober and then they use everything that works. And as long as it works, they're going to use it until it stops working. And then at some point you get down to a drink or God. Boom, that's it. Those are the 2 choices. And I have experienced that. One time, I used to love it when I was young and cute, and I loved to get attention from men. I could flirt with them and get anything I wanted. And I remember doing that. And I remember getting the attention, and it did not fill the hole inside. And I was so mad at her. I was like, damn it, I knew it. She said this would happen. Or, anything else. Like I've gone through different things, compulsive. I used to be in thrift stores for hours. I wouldn't even want to admit to people how long I was in that thrift store. I had to see every bargain back when I was really poor and I had to buy clothes for 2 kids. And oh my gosh, I wouldn't even want to tell people, but I felt this compulsion to see every single thing in the Goodwill. Or even just thoughts and ideas, belief systems. What do I think about myself? Being the smartest, thinking I'm the smartest person in the room. It's so beautiful to let go of those things through the steps process and just allow other people to be. There's a woman in here right now from Spain, and she's so much smarter than I am. And I just love it when she does stuff and I get to just sit back and do nothing. Letting other people. But we went through the first step process very slowly. And I really believe in that because when I wrote stuff down, I couldn't ignore it. See, I'm so good. Like I said, I'm so good at ignoring things. When I write it down, I can't ignore it. I can type it on a computer and I can see it right in front of me. I have to see it. That's how I am. I have to see it. I can't just think it or say it. I have to look it. I have to see the words. That's just how I learned. When I got to the end of chapter 3, I was miserable. And I said, am I supposed to be this miserable? And she said, yes, because you need to have no place else to go but God. And I want to fast forward. Thank God. I'm so grateful. She was such a beautiful, wonderful teacher. And since I've been on Zoom for the last 4 years and running into all kinds of different flavors of AA, I'm so grateful I had her as a person who taught me what this is about. And she said, I'm here to teach you the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And after that, It's to remind you to seek the spiritual solution to your problem. She doesn't play God. And in 2016, I met my now husband, and he was 3 months sober after a relapse. And you know what they say, don't touch them if they're in their first year. Don't. Of course, we're 50 and 51. Come on, guys. All right. So I went to her. I was like, hey, I'm having feelings for this man. And she said, because she does not believe, she says, I don't play God in your life. I don't know what experiences you're supposed to have. And she just said, come over tomorrow. Let's make sure you're in the book. Right. She might have said something like, oh boy, something like that, because we all know each other in Louisville AA. So she knew Rob, my husband. But let me tell you what happened. That man saved my life because I was a selfish, demanding, controlling. I had different dish towels for different things, you guys in the kitchen. The colored ones are to dry your hands. You can't bleach those, so don't use them for cleaning. The white ones are for cleaning. The bigger ones are to dry towels. The smaller ones are to wipe the counters down. Okay, seriously. I lived with kids. I was single for the longest time, and I only lived with children. So my whole life was about reducing chaos, right? He's here. He moves into my house, and he sits down about a month in, and he says, I don't even know where I'm allowed to sit in this house. And I felt so bad. And he's a very gentle, kind, loving. He's got a huge heart. He's one of those guys that looks like a big, strong man, but he's probably in this room. He's probably mad at me right now. Maybe he's watching racing. Supposedly he's watching racing, so he might not be listening to this part. But it made me realize, like, I can hurt somebody that I care about, and I don't want to hurt him. The way that I came across, I think God put us together. It's so crazy, you all, because, and it's almost comical. It's been so hard and painful at times. He runs. He's got that response, and I have abandonment issues. He has shame, and I'm critical and demanding. We have both had to work really hard to be part of this relationship, but our love, like, it's so crazy how that worked because, honey, if I could have left that man in 2022, I would have left. You know how many people I've left? I couldn't leave him. I don't know what happened. And I've done the work. It's not some sick codependency story. It's a real weird thing when you go from here to here to here. And I think that for me, God puts me in corners, right? God will put me in a corner where I can't use the old tools. The old tools, I can see them. They're right over there. One of my tools was to say, no, when I was single and dating and I had 2 kids, or then 3, then I had 3. I had to think about what kind of person am I bringing into my kids' lives, right? And I had one year where it was like a Seinfeld episode. My dating life was just so entertaining to my friends, right? I would go and tell them these stories. Oh God. Anyway. And I just had all these great nope, 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 nope. But with him, I don't know, there's something there. It really does feel like there's a God with us. I thought if he ever relapsed, I would leave him. He did relapse. And you know how I felt? I cared about him more than I cared, not more. I cared about him as much as I care about my children. How is that possible? When we got married, I figured that was a good foundation for marriage. If you care about somebody that much, that sounds like a good one, right? And it's not been easy. It's been a hard relationship. We kind of have, those things they have in the factories where there's days since an accident's happened. We make jokes about days since we've had a fight, right? And it's getting a lot better. But in 2022, he relapsed. I didn't know it yet. Things went downhill very quickly. And I'm a person who does not tolerate being abused at all. And some things happened. We had gone through some things before, and so this was not the first time. And I was like, I'm not tolerating this. I'm sorry. And then a couple more things happened, and I said, that's it. We're done. This is the one thing that you could have done to get rid of me. You did it. I'm out. And I did. We broke up. And he went on and had a relapse again, I didn't know for a little while until he had relapsed, and he relapsed for 6 months. There were so many stories I could tell you about how painful that was, obviously for him, but it was also painful for me because I couldn't stop caring about him and worrying about whether or not he was going to live or die. He lost 50 pounds on crack cocaine, and we tried to reconcile a few times. And I finally told him, like, I cannot talk to you unless you're inside a treatment center. So he went twice. He went once for 47 hours. Yes, I know. Have I been to Al-Anon? Yes, I have. I've done Al-Anon and Al-Anon steps, just so you know. But yes, did I know it was 47 hours? I did. And then 10 days. And I went, for a while. I didn't have any contact with him. I went on a trip to England where I got to meet a lot of people from my home group. It was amazing. My international group, spend time with the sponsee that I absolutely love and her little boys. And then I came home and, or actually right before that, right before I decided to go on that trip, I had a night where I found out he was with a woman, an ex of his. And I was devastated. I was destroyed. I was going to come home and I was either going to drink or hurt myself. I was 34 years sober. It was the August of 2022. Now, mind you, during COVID, I got very involved in AA. I helped start a newcomers group that meets daily. I was neck deep in service with this group. And while things were happening, I had a service role where I did the schedule. So I needed to show up for the meeting to see who was showing up, because you get some newcomers that they want to be part of the group and do service, but then they stop showing. You just got to kind of keep track and then do outreach, hopefully, and all that stuff. So I was showing up, but I was often just sitting in bed, crying, not on camera, not calling anyone because I didn't want to talk about what was happening. That's for sure. And the after meeting at our meeting had gotten to the place where we stay after the meeting and we continue to use raised hands to call on people so that we can all share. And it had gotten to be a thing where we called on everyone in the room, because if someone's hanging out with their camera off, maybe they need help. Maybe they want to share. So they would call on me. So many times I would just start crying. I would just cry and talk about what was happening. So that night in August, when I came home, and I have family that work in the liquor industry, and they send me these collectible bottles of bourbon and all this stuff, and I've kept them for my kids' legacy, and I never was afraid of having them in the house, ever. Never once did it ever bother me to think that they were here somewhere in a box. But it crossed my mind that night. I thought I wouldn't even have to go to the store. I got stuff right here. So that night, I was driving home, and I feel like 1,000 knives are cutting me to pieces. I can't stand the way that I feel. I'm going to get drunk. I'm going to hurt myself. I immediately started calling people. No one answered the phone. Finally, somebody called me back, and it was actually a man who's good friends to both me and my husband, who always supported our relationship and cared about us working out. And I was screaming to him, and I was telling him everything I was picturing. I have a photographic mind, so it was pretty brutal for me. And he was so wonderful. But in all of that, what saved my life that night, and I'd heard about people who were decades sober and then went back out, and I thought, how does that happen? Like, I think somewhere deep down, I thought maybe I'm immune to that. I didn't know that I thought that until this night, right? Because I didn't know, like, how do you end up drinking after 30 years? That's insane. I can't even imagine how that works. That night, the thought that came to me, I did not conjure it up. I didn't analyze, think it, plan it. It just came. It was, you have a lot of people watching you go through this because you've been sharing about it at your home group. I thought, I'm not going to lose my sobriety over this. I'm going to show them I can get through this sober. And that was that little bit, that little inspiration, that thought, that strength that came, that I believe so many times that's my God speaking to me, right? Coming through, bringing me stuff, right? And I could tell you, if we had another hour, I could tell you about 50 more of these times, these little moments. And what if I hadn't been in the middle? What if I hadn't been sharing? Do you know how many years I've isolated and not practiced this program? How many times I wasn't involved in a home group. You know, I'm real good on the book, but there have been times I haven't been any part of a home group. I haven't had a sponsor or used her. I've had her. I haven't used her. I haven't sponsored. I mean, being a full member of Alcoholics Anonymous is the three sides of a triangle, you know? And if I'm not in all three, I think I'm at risk. And there are many times I don't think I needed all of it. You know, apparently not, because I got through, right? I'm not going to judge anybody's sobriety. If what you're doing is working for you, keep doing it. And if it's not, you might have more to learn and more to do. And AA gives me tons of things to do. Let's see, I have a few minutes. In the fall of 2020, I want to mention this. I've found a group where they talk a lot about what does alcoholism look like in the day that I'm in and what do I do about it. And I swear I come from places where you never hear about 10, 11, and 12, especially 10. You know, why don't you just do a 4-step once a year? They acted like the 10th step was 4-step light, right? Why would you do that? You can just do the 10th step is constant, right? I did not know that all day long, my mind is like this. I wake up thinking about things, you know, I wake up thinking, Kevin doesn't like me. I pissed him off yesterday. Why isn't he answering my text? My brain goes all day long, you know, like a little hamster on a wheel. How do I solve my weight problem? How do I fix the front door? What do I do about my sister? It's always out there trying to solve problems and answer questions, solve problems, fill in the blank. I didn't know. I had this sort of idea about God. But see, if I don't know something, I don't know that I don't know it. I don't even question it. If I think I have all the answers, I don't even ask a question. You know, and I would give talks on step 3, never having practiced it in my life. That's how blind I was to actually what I was doing versus what I wasn't doing. Until so many times I got to places where I did not have answers. And you know where I first happened? Was sponsoring. When I sponsor, people ask me questions I don't know the answers to. And I had a sponsor that moved to rural Maine and she didn't have reception. So I'm texting her going, what do I say to this person? And she's not answering. And that happened to me one time and I sent up a little prayer, not even knowing I was doing it. And I got inspiration. I got an answer. And one time it was this woman, you know, I just started talking. I heard she called you, give her your experience. And I started talking about the AA triangle and all the things. And I said, when my life sounds like yours, usually I'm not doing something that's part of the triangle. And she starts laughing. She said, oh my God, you're right. I'm not doing anything. And then, you know, in AA service, that's where I have to practice my program the most. There's a lot of people in AA that I don't necessarily want to be nice to them when they're mean to me. You know, I had a sister that would always never get in trouble. I always got in trouble. She never got in trouble. So you get these people in AA they're mean. Some of them are mean, you know, and what I'm guided to do as a member of AA is to be kind, loving, patient, give them everything they want, think about them. My ego doesn't like that at all, you know? Nope, she don't want to do that. And that's where I get to practice 10 all day, 10 and 11 all day long, 11 nightly review, whatever. We can get technical. But the point is, I got to turn to God because I don't have the power. What my internal alcoholic ego wants to do is not what I should do. And when I get to that place, that's where I have an experience. Like I have this, my heart softens. You know, I turn to God. I'm like, help me, God. I had one quick story on that one. And it does force me to keep growing. It does. Like I have no choice because a lot of times there's no way out of what's happening, you know. Last year, there was a woman who was literally telling lies about me. Some of you have heard me speak. I've already heard this story. I'm looking at Adrian. Oh my God, she just kept saying and doing really inappropriate things, stepping on toes, all this stuff. And it was really driving me crazy. But I wanted to like give her a good experience of me and of the group that we were both in. So I'm calling ladies. I'm like, what do I do about this woman? No, I don't know what to do. And they would say, oh, it sounds like she has outside issues. You don't have to worry about her. Oh yeah, I like that answer. That sounds great. That was my first thought, right? And then I talked to this woman. She's a former punk rocker out of LA. She's bright, bright dyed red hair. I think she's getting close to, she's late 60s. She cracks me up. She's awesome. Love her so much. We'll have to get her here when she's in a friendlier time zone. Right now, she's in Thailand. And I asked her about the same thing, the same woman. I told her the same story. And she said, it sounds like this woman wants your friendship and approval. Have you thought about just giving her everything she wants? And I thought, first thought, can I pretend like we didn't have this phone call? I just want to go back to those other ladies, their advice, right? That sounds better to me. Oh, that's my own timer. And my second thought was the F word, and my third thought was she's right. She's the one who's right. And my heart softened. It really did. I started to picture being really kind to that woman and reaching out to her. And do you know what happened? She stopped attending the same group I was in for like 3 months. I thought I was getting a break. And I forgot to mention my husband, the end of my husband's story. I just realized um, he relapsed for 6 months, and one of his really good friends somehow I ended up talking to him, and he said, Elizabeth, he loves you. This is his disease. And I listened, and when my husband was ready for help, um, he went to Texas. He was there almost 6 months. So we were apart for almost a year. He went to inpatient, and he's still doing a lot of work. He's a full AA member. I made sure that I need him to be. That's my sobriety too. That's my life too. So I don't know about two AAs. I think you can't have one that's, I don't know. I'm glad I'm not in that situation, but um, I'm really grateful that I really did listen to my God the whole time. I didn't listen to other people. Some people would say, oh, get rid of him. That sounds terrible. All this stuff. You get all this advice. You want to find out how people are doing spiritually. Talk to them about your relationship and see what happens, right? I had a lot of God players trying to tell me what to do or not do. And the thing is that the book guides us, to seek God's help in every one of those situations. And I did. And I know that I stayed true to myself the whole time. I did get guidance. I kept up with that I had no choice, guys. I had no power in the situation. I had no ability to have any control over any part of that. And and I really found out. I did two-way prayer for a period of time and really loved that. You can look that up, two-way prayer, if you don't know what it is. Had some powerful experiences with that. And I'm so grateful. Like, I can say today that I really am fully in AA. I do a lot of service. I love the people I've met in service. I do speaker seeking for this group this year, and another group, which is great because you're asking people to do something they usually like doing, so you're like, hey, do you want to speak for this meeting? Usually they like being asked. So it's really taken away my fear of people. My sponsor being unavailable for a period of time, she was going through some stuff, really pushed me to reach out more because I tend to want to just trust one person and talk to one person. But because of that, I ended up reaching out to a lot more people, and I'm so grateful for that. Made a lot of friends all over the world now, which is just crazy. I know a lot of us are having those experiences online. And I really do, I have really found that as with that statement in the 12 and 12 is so true, because when I don't have the answers and I wait for God to give me the answer, my mind is peaceful in the meantime. And I had to practice it really hard because it was not what I was used to. I'm used to solving problems and having answers. But when I can truly say, God, take this from me, show me what you want me to do right here in this moment. And when you're neck deep in service, we have so many newcomers we're helping at this newcomers meeting. There's never a shortage of people to check on for me to get out of myself or whatever it is that my brain wants to be doing. And I find that when I do that, it really does, like everything really is a lot better, because no matter what's happening, my well-being doesn't depend on what happened or doesn't happen today, which is crazy to say because it used to always depend on that. And I'm really grateful that I've learned that seemingly just in time. It always seems like that. I learn a little bit more about recovery right before I need to know it, which seems to happen. So Anyway, thank you for listening to me and letting me tell my story. And I hope that something I've said has helped someone in here. I didn't know how it was going to come out. It's daunting to have the whole hour to yourself. And I'm going to keep doing this thing. I don't want to lose what I have. I have a lot to lose today, and I'm not willing to risk it. So I'm going to keep on doing this stuff. Thanks a lot.